On your knees. Clean it. Lauren Whitaker said the words as if she were correcting a smudge on glass, not speaking to a man. The sentence sliced through the executive lobby on the 51st floor of Sterling and Vale Capital, and for one long second, even the building seemed to stop breathing. The black coffee she had spilled spread slowly across the white marble floor, dark and glossy beneath the cold ceiling lights, crawling toward the polished chrome base of the reception desk. Around it, everything else remained perfect. The glass walls were spotless. The silver elevator doors reflected the skyline of Manhattan. The air smelled faintly of espresso, winter coats, and expensive floor polish. Assistants froze with tablets in their hands. A receptionist looked down at her keyboard as if the right letter might save her from witnessing what had just happened. Near the printer, a young black intern clutched a stack of folders against his chest and stared at the floor, his jaw tight, his eyes lowered in a way that told Marcus Ellison he had seen moments like this before. Marcus stood 6 feet 2 inches tall in the center of the lobby, calm beneath a dark gray three-piece suit, his light blue shirt crisp at the collar, his deep burgundy tie resting neatly against his vest. His hair was cropped close, his beard shaped with careful precision, and in his right hand he carried an old brown leather briefcase with worn corners and softened seams. It was the only thing about him that looked out of place in that shining room, and Lauren had noticed it immediately. Not the quality of his suit, not the steadiness of his posture, not the quiet intelligence in his eyes. The briefcase, the visitor badge printed downstairs with only his last name. The fact that he had stepped out of the public elevator without an assistant clearing the path. Lauren was in her early 30s, blonde hair swept into a smooth professional twist, navy business suit fitted with exacting care, white blouse sharp beneath the lapels. She had the controlled expression of someone who believed disorder was a personal insult. She glanced from Marcus to the coffee spill, then to the supply closet near the service hall. The cleaning team is short this morning, she added, her voice low enough to sound professional and loud enough for everyone to hear. If you want to stand on this floor, you can start by respecting it. Marcus did not move. He looked at the spill, then at the faces around them, then back at Lauren. His silence was not confusion. It was measurement. He had arrived 1 hour before the official announcement, without cameras, without a welcome committee, without the board chairman walking beside him. That had been his choice. Sterling and Vale had nearly collapsed under its own polished arrogance, and Marcus had agreed to lead the company only after telling the board one thing. Before he changed the numbers, he needed to understand the culture. So he came early, alone, carrying his father's briefcase and a folded letter inside his jacket pocket. Never let a room decide your worth before you decide your purpose. His father had written that when Marcus was 22, back when every interview felt like a locked door with a polite smile. Marcus felt those words now, warm against his chest, while Lauren stood in front of him waiting for obedience. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Would you speak to me this way if you thought I owned the floor you were standing on?" A faint ripple passed through the lobby. Someone stopped typing. The receptionist's fingers hovered above the keys. Lauren's expression tightened, not because she understood the question, but because she felt challenged in front of people she was used to controlling. "This is an executive floor," she said. "It is not a place for games." "I agree." "Then clean the mess and move along." The coffee continued to spread, thin at the edges, black against white stone. Marcus looked again at the young intern by the printer. The boy's eyes flicked up for half a second, full of embarrassment that was not his own, then dropped again. That small movement made Marcus's decision for him. He would not reveal himself yet. Not because he feared Lauren, and not because he lacked the power to end the moment with one sentence. He stayed silent because the truth of a place was easiest to see before anyone knew they were being tested. Lauren lifted her chin. "Do I need to call security?" Marcus slowly lowered his briefcase beside his polished shoes. The leather touched the marble with a soft, tired sound. The entire lobby watched as he removed his gloves, folded them once, and set them on top of the briefcase. Then he looked at Lauren, not angry, not broken, only deeply awake. "No," he said. "You need to remember this moment clearly." Lauren stared at Marcus for a moment, as if the sentence had reached her a second later than everyone else. "You need to remember this moment clearly." It was not shouted. It was not dramatic. That was what made it difficult to dismiss. The words sat between them with the quiet weight of a signed document, and the people in the lobby seemed to understand that something larger than a coffee spill had begun. Lauren glanced toward the receptionist, then toward the glass hallway that led to the executive conference rooms. Her face hardened again, rebuilding itself into authority. "I will remember that you were asked to handle a simple problem and chose to make it difficult," she said. Marcus looked down at the coffee spreading in a thin, dark line across the marble. Simple problems usually reveal complicated truths. Lauren gave a short laugh. "That sounds very impressive. It also sounds like something people say when they do not want to work." A few eyes moved toward Marcus, then away. He heard the sentence land where she intended it to land, not on his suit, not on his posture, but somewhere beneath them, where people like Lauren kept the assumptions they rarely admitted out loud. Marcus slowly reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, not quickly enough to alarm anyone, only carefully enough to retrieve a folded white handkerchief. It was plain, clean, and old-fashioned, the kind his mother used to press into his palm before school interviews and Sunday services. He did not unfold it yet. Instead, he held it between two fingers and looked across the lobby. The young intern by the printer had stopped pretending not to watch. His name badge read Caleb Morris. He could not have been more than 21. The folders in his arms were labeled Executive Transition Briefing, and the top page had bent under the pressure of his grip. Marcus recognized that grip. He had held papers like that once, too, standing in rooms where every mistake felt permanent and every silence felt safer than truth. Years earlier, before private equity firms called him a strategist, before business magazines called him disciplined, before Sterling and Vale's board begged him to accept the chief executive role, Marcus had been a scholarship kid from Newark trying to sound calm in rooms that mistook calm for permission to test him. His father, Samuel Ellison, had repaired city buses for 34 years. His mother, Ruth, had worked payroll at a hospital and kept a notebook of every bill paid, every loan denied, every door that opened late but still opened. They taught Marcus to walk straight, speak clearly, and never confuse humiliation with humility. There was a difference. Humility was knowing you were not above service. Humiliation was someone else trying to convince you that service made you beneath them. That difference moved through him now as he looked at the marble floor. He had cleaned floors before. He had scrubbed restaurant kitchens during college, emptied trash in office buildings after midnight, and mopped convenience store aisles under buzzing fluorescent lights. There was dignity in work. There was no dignity in Lauren's voice. "Do you know where the supply closet is?" Lauren asked, turning slightly toward the service hall. "Or do I need to walk you there?" Marcus looked back at her. "You spilled the coffee." Her jaw tightened. "Excuse me." "You spilled it," he repeated. "You walked too quickly around the desk, looked at your phone, and the cup tipped." Everyone saw it. The receptionist inhaled softly. Caleb's eyes widened. Lauren's fingers tightened around the tablet in her hand. "I am not debating fault with you. I am not debating either." Marcus unfolded the handkerchief. "I am identifying what happened before it gets rewritten." The sentence seemed to disturb the lobby more than open anger would have. Sterling and Vale was a company built on polished surfaces and carefully revised language. Mistakes became operational gaps. Bias became tone. Fear became caution. People learned to survive by accepting the version of events that protected the strongest person in the room. Marcus had read the reports. He had studied the numbers, the resignations, the exit interviews softened by legal review. But numbers did not show him the temperature of the place. This did. The cold light. The silent staff. The manager who confused power with cleanliness. "Last chance," Lauren said, her voice lower now. "Clean it and move along, or I will have security remove you from this floor." Marcus looked at the handkerchief in his palm, then slowly lowered himself to one knee beside the coffee spill. The lobby went completely still. He did not bow his head. He did not rush. He touched the cloth to the edge of the spill with deliberate care, as if every movement were being recorded by something deeper than cameras. When the white cotton met the dark coffee, the stain spread through it immediately. Marcus looked at the mark, then at Lauren. "Some stains do not start on the floor," he said. Lauren looked down at Marcus on one knee, and for the first time that morning, the perfection of the lobby began to feel unstable. It was not because he looked defeated. He did not. That was what unsettled her. A defeated person would have hurried, apologized, kept his eyes low, made the room comfortable again. Marcus did none of those things. He knelt beside the spill with his back straight, his shoulders calm beneath the dark gray suit, his burgundy tie still neat against his vest, and the old handkerchief in his hand turning brown at the edges from the coffee. The image should have confirmed Lauren's authority. Instead, it exposed the emptiness beneath it. "You have a very strange way of following instructions," she said. Her voice was sharper now, but less certain. Marcus wiped one careful line across the marble, slow enough for every person watching to understand that he was not cleaning because she had power over him. He was revealing what her power did when no one challenged it. The white stone appeared again beneath the cloth, bright under the ceiling lights, but the air around them seemed darker than before. "Instructions deserve respect," Marcus said. "People deserve it first." Lauren's mouth tightened. "You are on a restricted executive floor. You do not get to lecture me about respect. Then verify my appointment." She blinked. "What appointment?" "The one I mentioned downstairs. The one printed on the transition schedule your office received last night." The receptionist, whose nameplate read Emily Foster, looked up too quickly, then looked away. Lauren noticed. "Emily," she said, controlled and cold, "do not involve yourself." Emily's fingers froze above the keyboard. Marcus saw the fear in that tiny pause. It was the kind of fear that did not come from one bad morning. It came from months, maybe years, of learning that truth had consequences when it embarrassed the wrong person. Lauren turned back to Marcus. "If you had a legitimate appointment, someone would have escorted you. Unless I asked not to be escorted. Why would anyone do that?" Marcus folded the stained handkerchief once, not to hide the mark, but to keep it from spreading. "To see how the company treats a man before it knows what to call him." A quiet breath moved through the lobby. Caleb Morris, still near the printer, lifted his eyes again. Emily stared at her screen, but her shoulders shifted as if the sentence had reached somewhere she had kept locked. Lauren felt the room listening to him now, and that was the real offense. Not the spill, not the question, the shift. 10 minutes earlier, the lobby had belonged to her. The floor, the schedules, the access list, the staff who lowered their voices when she approached. She had earned that control, or at least she told herself she had. She had started at Sterling and Vale as an executive assistant who stayed late, arrived early, memorized names, covered mistakes, anticipated tempers, and learned which people mattered before they entered a room. Over time, she became the person who kept the executive floor running without visible friction. No missed briefings. No loose documents. No wrong visitors. No fingerprints on glass. No surprises. The board liked her because she made disorder disappear. Senior partners praised her because she knew when to say yes before being asked. But somewhere along the way, order had become a weapon in her hand. She began to see people as interruptions first, human beings second. Cleaning staff were invisible unless something was dirty. Interns were useful unless they were nervous. Visitors without titles were problems unless someone important claimed them. And Marcus, arriving alone with an old briefcase and no one clearing the hallway for him, had been placed in the wrong category before he spoke a full sentence. "Stand up," Lauren said suddenly. Marcus remained still. "I thought you wanted the floor cleaned." Her face flushed with frustration. "Do not twist this into something it is not." "What is it then?" The question landed softly, but it trapped her because every honest answer sounded worse than silence. Lauren glanced toward the elevators. The private bank of doors at the far end remained closed, brushed silver reflecting the lobby in thin, distorted shapes. Behind those doors, the board chairman was expected to arrive any minute with the legal team for the confidential leadership announcement. Lauren had spent all weekend preparing the floor for that moment. The flowers in the conference room had been changed twice. The bottled water labels faced the same direction. The new chief executive's name card had been placed at the head of the table, face down until the official reveal. She had not seen a photograph. Only the name, Marcus Ellison. For one brief second, something in her memory stirred, but pride shut it down before it became thought. "Emily," Lauren said, "call security." Emily looked at Marcus, then at the stained handkerchief, then at Caleb, whose folders trembled slightly in his arms. "Ms. Whitaker," Emily said carefully, "maybe I should check the transition schedule first." Lauren turned to her with a look so sharp the words died between them. "Call security." The command left no room for dignity, only obedience. Emily reached for the phone with a hand that did not want to move. Marcus slowly rose from one knee, picked up his briefcase, and stood tall again beneath the cold white lights. The coffee stain was smaller now, but the silence had grown larger. He looked at Lauren, not with anger, but with a sadness that made her look away for half a second. "Remember this part too," he said. The phone began to ring downstairs, and the sound traveled through the lobby like the first bell of a reckoning. Lauren looked down at Marcus on one knee, and for the first time that morning, the perfection of the lobby began to feel unstable. It was not because he looked defeated. He did not. That was what unsettled her. A defeated person would have hurried, apologized, kept his eyes low, made the room comfortable again. Marcus did none of those things. He knelt beside the spill with his back straight, his shoulders calm beneath the dark gray suit, his burgundy tie still neat against his vest, and the old handkerchief in his hand turning brown at the edges from the coffee. The image should have confirmed Lauren's authority. Instead, it exposed the emptiness beneath it. "You have a very strange way of following instructions," she said. Her voice was sharper now, but less certain. Marcus wiped one careful line across the marble, slow enough for every person watching to understand that he was not cleaning because she had power over him. He was revealing what her power did when no one challenged it. The white stone appeared again beneath the cloth, bright under the ceiling lights, but the air around them seemed darker than before. "Instructions deserve respect," Marcus said. "People deserve it first." Lauren's mouth tightened. "You are on a restricted executive floor. You do not get to lecture me about respect. Then verify my appointment." She blinked. "What appointment?" "The one I mentioned downstairs. The one printed on the transition schedule your office received last night." The receptionist, whose nameplate read Emily Foster, looked up too quickly, then looked away. Lauren noticed. "Emily," she said, controlled and cold. "Do not involve yourself." Emily's fingers froze above the keyboard. Marcus saw the fear in that tiny pause. It was the kind of fear that did not come from one bad morning. It came from months, maybe years, of learning that truth had consequences when it embarrassed the wrong person. Lauren turned back to Marcus. "If you had a legitimate appointment, someone would have escorted you. Unless I asked not to be escorted. Why would anyone do that?" Marcus folded the stained handkerchief once, not to hide the mark, but to keep it from spreading. "To see how the company treats a man before it knows what to call him." A quiet breath moved through the lobby. Caleb Morris, still near the printer, lifted his eyes again. Emily stared at her screen, but her shoulders shifted as if the sentence had reached somewhere she had kept locked. Lauren felt the room listening to him now, and that was the real offense. Not the spill, not the question, the shift. 10 minutes earlier, the lobby had belonged to her. The floor, the schedules, the access list, the staff who lowered their voices when she approached. She had earned that control, or at least she told herself she had. She had started at Sterling and Vale as an executive assistant who stayed late, arrived early, memorized names, covered mistakes, anticipated tempers, and learned which people mattered before they entered a room. Over time, she became the person who kept the executive floor running without visible friction. No missed briefings. No loose documents. No wrong visitors. No fingerprints on glass. No surprises. The board liked her because she made disorder disappear. Senior partners praised her because she knew when to say yes before being asked. But somewhere along the way, order had become a weapon in her hand. She began to see people as interruptions first, human beings second. Cleaning staff were invisible unless something was dirty. Interns were useful unless they were nervous. Visitors without titles were problems unless someone important claimed them. And Marcus, arriving alone with an old briefcase and no one clearing the hallway for him, had been placed in the wrong category before he spoke a full sentence. "Stand up," Lauren said suddenly. Marcus remained still. "I thought you wanted the floor cleaned." Her face flushed with frustration. "Do not twist this into something it is not." "What is it then?" The question landed softly, but it trapped her because every honest answer sounded worse than silence. Lauren glanced toward the elevators. The private bank of doors at the far end remained closed, brushed silver reflecting the lobby in thin, distorted shapes. Behind those doors, the board chairman was expected to arrive any minute with the legal team for the confidential leadership announcement. Lauren had spent all weekend preparing the floor for that moment. The flowers in the conference room had been changed twice. The bottled water labels faced the same direction. The new chief executive's name card had been placed at the head of the table, face down until the official reveal. She had not seen a photograph. Only the name, Marcus Ellison. For one brief second, something in her memory stirred, but pride shut it down before it became thought. "Emily," Lauren said, "call security." Emily looked at Marcus, then at the stained handkerchief, then at Caleb, whose folders trembled slightly in his arms. "Ms. Whitaker," Emily said carefully, "maybe I should check the transition schedule first." Lauren turned to her with a look so sharp the words died between them. "Call security." The command left no room for dignity, only obedience. Emily reached for the phone with a hand that did not want to move. Marcus slowly rose from one knee, picked up his briefcase, and stood tall again beneath the cold white lights. The coffee stain was smaller now, but the silence had grown larger. He looked at Lauren, not with anger, but with a sadness that made her look away for half a second. "Remember this part too," he said. The phone began to ring downstairs, and the sound traveled through the lobby like the first bell of a reckoning. The security officers arrived before the echo of the last elevator chime had fully faded. Two of them stepped onto the marble floor in dark navy uniforms, their shoes making careful, measured sounds that seemed too loud in the frozen lobby. The older officer glanced first at Lauren, then at the coffee stain, then at Marcus Ellison standing beside his old leather briefcase with the stained handkerchief folded neatly in one hand. The younger officer looked uncertain, as if the picture in front of him did not match the urgency of the call he had received downstairs. Lauren moved toward them quickly, grateful for the arrival of authority she believed would confirm her version of the morning. "This individual is refusing to follow instructions and disrupting the executive floor," she said. Her voice had regained its polish, but the edges were thin now, brittle beneath the confidence. "He entered without proper escort, questioned my authority, and created a scene in front of staff." Marcus listened without interrupting. That was what unsettled everyone most. A man being accused often rushed to defend himself. Marcus did not. He stood in the cold white light, 6 feet 2 inches of stillness, his dark gray suit untouched by the chaos around him, his burgundy tie steady against the calm rise and fall of his breath. The handkerchief in his hand carried the coffee mark like evidence, but not the kind Lauren wanted. The older officer cleared his throat. "Sir, may I see your identification?" Marcus nodded and reached slowly into his jacket pocket. No sudden movement, no impatience. He had learned long ago that some men were allowed to be casual while others had to make dignity visible in every gesture. He handed over his identification card. The officer looked at it, then at the temporary visitor badge clipped to Marcus's lapel. "Mr. Ellison," the officer read aloud. The name traveled through the lobby differently now. Emily Foster looked up from the reception desk. Caleb Morris tightened his grip on the folders again, but this time not from fear. Lauren's eyes flickered, just once, toward the glass hallway where the executive conference room waited behind closed doors. "A last name does not prove access," she said quickly. "Check the transition schedule," Marcus said. The older officer turned toward Emily. "Can you verify the appointment?" Emily hesitated. Lauren stepped in before she could answer. "Security does not need to involve reception in every access issue." The officer looked at Lauren, then back at Emily. Procedure was beginning to pull against politics. Emily swallowed and touched the keyboard. Her screen lit her face pale blue. The lobby held its breath. For a few seconds, only. The tapping of keys and the low hum of the ventilation system filled the air. Then Emily stopped. Her eyes moved across the monitor once, then again, slower. "There is a 9 o'clock leadership transition meeting," she said quietly. Lauren's expression sharpened. "That is confidential." Emily looked at Marcus, then back at the screen. "The attendee list is restricted." "Then open it," Marcus said. His voice remained low, but it carried. "You have authorization at that desk." Emily's fingers hovered. Lauren's hand came down lightly on the edge of the counter. Not a strike, not force, but enough to make Emily flinch. "Do not open a restricted board file because a visitor tells you to." Marcus turned his eyes to Lauren. "You call me a visitor because it makes the rest easier." The words sank deep. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. Several employees behind the glass wall had stopped pretending to work altogether. Caleb finally stepped forward 1 inch, then another. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, voice careful but clear. "His name is on the folder I am carrying." Lauren turned toward him so fast that the folders trembled in his arms. Caleb, return to your station. He did not. His face was tense, but he lifted the top folder just enough for the printed label to show. Leadership Transition Briefing. Marcus Ellison. The older officer saw it. Emily saw it. The younger officer saw it. Lauren saw it last, and something in her face went still. Not remorse yet. Not understanding. Only the first crack in certainty. Before anyone could speak, the private elevator doors at the far end of the lobby opened with a smooth silver whisper. Richard Hale, the chairman of the board, stepped out with 2 attorneys and a senior security director carrying a sealed file. Richard looked toward the conference room first, annoyed by the delay. Then he saw Marcus standing beside the half-cleaned coffee stain, handkerchief marked dark in his hand, security officers between him and the boardroom. The chairman stopped so abruptly that the attorneys behind him nearly did the same. His face changed from impatience to disbelief, and then to something much heavier. "Mr. Ellison," Richard said, his voice suddenly rough in the polished air. "Why are you still out here?" Richard Hale's question did not need to be loud to empty the air from the lobby. It moved through the glass walls, across the marble floor, past the security officers, and settled on Lauren Whitaker like a hand placed firmly on a closed door. "Why are you still out here?" Marcus Ellison did not answer immediately. He looked down at the handkerchief in his hand, the white cotton now stained brown at the fold, then at the thin coffee mark still visible on the marble. The spill had stopped spreading, but the moment had not. It had seeped into every face around him. Emily Foster stood behind the reception desk with both hands near the keyboard, afraid to move and afraid not to. Caleb Morris held the transition folders against his chest, his young face tight with the shock of having spoken truth and survived the first second after it. The 2 security officers stood between procedure and embarrassment, suddenly aware that they had been called into something that was never only about access. Lauren remained near the counter, her navy suit perfect, her blonde hair smooth, her white blouse crisp beneath the collar, but her expression had gone pale and still. Richard stepped closer, followed by the attorneys and the senior security director. His eyes moved from Marcus's briefcase to the stained handkerchief, then to Lauren, then to the security officers. The chairman was a man who had spent 40 years learning to read rooms before anyone spoke in them. This room was speaking loudly. "Mr. Ellison," he said again, softer now. "The board has been waiting." Marcus lifted his eyes. "I know." Richard's jaw tightened. Then what happened? No one breathed easily. Lauren opened her mouth, but Marcus did not look at her. He looked instead at the marble floor, at the place where one dark line of coffee had been wiped clean while the rest remained faintly visible. "There was a spill," he said. The simplicity of it made Lauren blink. It almost sounded merciful. Almost. "Ms. Whitaker asked me to clean it." Richard's expression changed, not all at once, but in layers. First confusion, then disbelief, then recognition of the shape of the insult before the words had fully formed around it. One of the attorneys lowered her eyes to the floor. The senior security director, a tall woman named Denise Carter, turned slowly toward Lauren with a professional stillness that carried more force than anger. Lauren tried to gather herself. "Chairman Hale, I did not realize who he was." Marcus finally looked at her. "That is the problem." The sentence was quiet enough that the heating system almost swallowed it, but it reached everyone. Lauren's lips parted. No defense came. Outside the windows, Manhattan moved behind the glass as if nothing had happened. Traffic far below slid along the avenues. A yellow cab turned at the corner. Morning light pressed against the buildings in pale strips. Inside, time seemed to hold itself still. Marcus folded the handkerchief again, carefully aligning the stained edges. He thought of his father's hands after work, dark with grease that never fully left the skin no matter how hard he scrubbed. He thought of his mother setting a plate in front of him after late shifts at the hospital, telling him that clean work and dirty work were only names people gave to jobs when they wanted to rank the people doing them. He thought of every janitor who had polished floors executives crossed without looking down, every receptionist who had absorbed sharp words with a smile, every intern who had learned to disappear before learning to lead. The lobby smelled of coffee and floor polish, but beneath it Marcus could almost smell the old bus depot where his father had worked, warm metal, rubber, rainwater, and lunch packed in wax paper. He had not knelt because Lauren had authority over him. He had knelt because someone needed to make the room look at itself. For a long moment, no one spoke. The red light above the private elevator faded. The silver door slid closed behind the board chairman's group with a whisper that sounded final. Caleb shifted his weight, and the folders rustled against his jacket. Emily wiped one tear quickly from the corner of her eye, embarrassed by it, but Marcus saw. So did Lauren. That small human movement seemed to reach Lauren, in a way the title had not. Her face changed again, not dramatically, not enough to become redemption, but enough to show that something inside her had begun to understand the difference between being caught and being wrong. Richard looked at Denise Carter. Was access verified before security was called? Denise glanced at the officers, then at Emily's screen. No, sir. It appears verification was available and not completed. Richard closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his voice was controlled. Lauren. She turned toward him, shoulders tight. Yes, sir. Step into the boardroom with us. Lauren swallowed. Of course. Marcus picked up his briefcase. The old leather creaked softly in his hand. He looked once more at the unfinished stain on the floor, then at Lauren. Leave it, he said. We are not done looking at it yet. The boardroom door opened with a soft hydraulic sigh, and the silence inside was different from the silence in the lobby. Out there, the stillness had been shock. In here, it was anticipation, polished and expensive, arranged around a long, dark table with 12 leather chairs, 12 water glasses, 12 folders aligned to the edge, as if order alone could protect the company from truth. Morning light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, cutting pale rectangles across the carpet and catching the gold lettering on the name card at the head of the table. It lay face down, exactly as Lauren had placed it before sunrise. She had checked it twice with gloved hands, making sure no one would see the new chief executive's name before the chairman made the announcement. Now she could not stop looking at it. Marcus entered first, his old leather briefcase in one hand, the stained handkerchief folded in the other. Richard Hale followed beside him, no longer walking ahead like a man guiding a guest, but slightly behind, with the quiet respect given to someone who had already earned the room before stepping into it. Denise Carter remained near the door. The two attorneys took seats along the wall. Lauren stopped just inside the threshold, unsure where to stand, and that uncertainty marked her more visibly than any apology could have. The directors around the table looked up. Some smiled automatically, ready for ceremony, then faltered when they saw Marcus's expression and the coffee mark on the cloth in his hand. One older board member rose halfway from his chair. Another lowered his glasses. A woman near the windows glanced toward Richard, reading his face, then straightened slowly. Richard moved to the head of the table and turned the name card over. Marcus Ellison, Chief Executive Officer. The black lettering seemed to darken the air around it. Lauren's breath caught before she could stop it. The name she had seen in emails, schedules, and restricted briefing notes was no longer a line of text. It was the man she had ordered to the floor. Richard looked at the board. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice controlled but heavy. This is Marcus Ellison, the incoming Chief Executive Officer of Sterling and Vale Capital, the architect of the restructuring agreement that kept this company solvent, and the person we asked to lead us because he saw clearly what many of us refused to see. No one applauded. It was not that kind of moment. Marcus placed his briefcase beside the chair, but did not sit. He set the handkerchief on the table, stained side up, next to the polished name card. The contrast was so quiet and so complete that even the attorneys looked uncomfortable. Before we begin, Marcus said, I want everyone to understand why I came early. His voice filled the room without force. I did not come early to create a test. I came early to observe. There is a difference. A test assumes people are performing. Observation reveals what people believe they can do when no one important is watching. Lauren looked down. The word important struck harder than if he had raised his voice. Marcus looked around the table, meeting each director's eyes long enough to make retreat impossible. This company has excellent reports, beautiful offices, strong language about inclusion, carefully written values on the website. But culture is not what a company says after legal review. Culture is what happens in the hallway before the meeting starts. Richard's face tightened with shame. Denise Carter folded her hands in front of her. Lauren felt the heat rise under her collar and pressed her fingertips together to keep them still. Marcus continued. A spill happened outside. A manager chose not to correct the spill, not to ask for help respectfully, not to verify who I was. but to turn a simple accident into a public lesson about who she believed should kneel and who she believed had the right to command. Lauren closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, the room had not softened. Marcus turned slightly toward her. "Ms. Whitaker, I am going to ask you one question, and I do not want a polished answer." Her voice came out low. "Yes, Mr. Ellison. If I had walked in wearing this same suit, carrying a newer briefcase, with a white assistant saying my name before I spoke, would you have asked me to clean that floor?" The question did not echo, but it seemed to reach every corner of the room. Lauren's lips parted. For a moment, habit tried to save her. Procedure, confusion, confidentiality, restricted access. All the words lined up in her mind like shields. Then she looked through the glass wall into the lobby, where Caleb stood near the printer and Emily sat at reception with her hands folded in her lap. She saw the unfinished coffee stain still on the marble. She saw the young intern's face. She saw Marcus's handkerchief on the boardroom table. And finally, she told the truth. "No," she whispered. Marcus did not move. Richard lowered his gaze. Lauren swallowed and spoke again, clearer this time. "No, I would not have." The admission settled over the room with a strange, painful calm. Marcus nodded once, not in victory, but in acknowledgement. "Then now we can begin." Marcus did not sit after Lauren's admission. He let the truth remain in the air long enough for everyone to feel its weight without rushing to cover it with policy language. The boardroom was built for numbers, not confession. Its walls had heard forecasts, acquisition plans, risk models, and carefully phrased apologies that meant nothing once the minutes were approved. But this silence was different. It was not strategic. It was human. Lauren stood near the end of the table with her hands clasped in front of her, the navy sleeves of her suit smooth and perfect, while her face carried the first honest disorder anyone in that room had seen from her in years. She looked at Marcus, then at the stained handkerchief lying beside his name card, then through the glass toward the lobby where the faint coffee mark still waited on the marble. "Mr. Ellison," she said, her voice tight but clear, "I am sorry." Marcus watched her without softening the moment too soon. "For what?" The question was quiet, but it took away every easy exit. Lauren inhaled slowly. "For assuming you did not belong here." Marcus did not move. "That is part of it." Her eyes lowered. The directors shifted in their chairs, uncomfortable now in a way that did not allow them to feel separate from her. Richard Hale folded his hands on the table. Denise Carter remained near the door, still as a witness. Lauren looked back up, and something in her expression changed from self-protection to recognition. "For speaking to you as if your dignity depended on your job title," she said. Her voice thinned, but it did not break. "For using my authority to make other people silent. For making a mistake and then protecting the mistake because admitting it would have cost me control." Marcus nodded once, not to forgive yet, but to acknowledge that the words had finally reached the right place. "Do not apologize to my title," he said. "Titles are easy to respect. That is why they are dangerous. Apologize to the man you thought had none." Lauren's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears become performance. She turned toward the glass wall, toward Emily at the reception desk and Caleb near the printer, toward the unfinished stain on the floor. Then she walked out of the boardroom. No one stopped her. The sound of her heels crossed the threshold, moved over the carpet, then changed when she reached the marble. In the lobby, the staff stepped back slightly, not out of fear this time, but out of uncertainty. Lauren stopped beside the coffee stain. The cloth Marcus had used was still in the boardroom, so she took a clean towel from the supply cart Emily had quietly rolled near the wall. For a moment, she simply held it. The same floor that had been a symbol of her control now reflected her face back to her, pale and stripped of its practiced certainty. Slowly, without being ordered, without being watched by anyone who could save her pride, Lauren lowered herself to one knee beside the stain. The movement was not dramatic. It was careful. It was chosen. She pressed the towel to the marble and began to clean what she had spilled. The lobby did not whisper. No one laughed. Marcus stood inside the boardroom doorway, his briefcase at his side, watching not with satisfaction, but with a quiet sadness that had room for hope. Lauren wiped once, then again, until the last shadow of coffee disappeared into the towel. When she finished, she did not stand immediately. She looked up at Caleb first. "I am sorry you had to see that," she said. Caleb did not know what to do with the apology. He only nodded. Then she looked at Emily. I should never have made you afraid to tell the truth. Emily's lips pressed together, and she nodded too, smaller but steadier. Finally, Lauren turned to Marcus. I am sorry, she said, and this time her voice carried without polish. Not because you were my boss. Because you were a person before I knew that, and I treated you like you had to earn what should have already been yours. The words settled across the lobby with a gentleness that hurt more than accusation. Marcus walked toward her and stopped a few feet away. He did not offer his hand to lift her, because this was not a rescue. It was a reckoning she needed to complete herself. Stand up, Ms. Whitaker, he said. Then help me make sure no one in this company is ever made to feel small so someone else can feel important. Lauren rose slowly. The marble beneath her was clean now, but the room understood that the real work had just begun. 3 months later, the 51st floor of Sterling and Vale Capital no longer smelled only of floor polish and expensive coffee. It smelled faintly of fresh paint, new paper, and the quiet nervousness of a place trying to become better than its history. Near the entrance to the executive lobby, where the marble still reflected every passing figure in clean white light, a new brass sign had been mounted beside the reception desk. Dignity is policy here. The words were simple enough that no one could hide behind them and strong enough that no one could pretend not to understand. Marcus Ellison paused in front of the sign on a gray Thursday morning, his old brown leather briefcase resting at his side, his dark gray three-piece suit neat beneath the soft winter light coming through the windows. The city beyond the glass moved in its usual rush, taxis and buses threading through Manhattan traffic far below, but the lobby felt slower now, more awake. Emily Foster sat at reception with a calmness that had not been there before. When a delivery worker stepped off the elevator carrying 3 boxes and looking unsure where to go, she stood, smiled, and walked around the desk to help him herself. No one looked bothered by the interruption. No one acted as though service made a person invisible. Near the printer, Caleb Morris stood in a fitted blazer that no longer looked borrowed. He was presenting a revised onboarding packet to 2 new interns, his voice still careful, but steady. Marcus watched him point toward the access policy, then toward the dignity statement, explaining that every visitor, employee, contractor, driver, cleaner, executive, and client would be greeted by name whenever possible and treated with the same baseline respect before any title was known. Caleb saw Marcus and straightened slightly, but Marcus only gave him a small nod that said continue. The young man did. That mattered. Across the lobby, Lauren Whitaker stood beside a new employee from facilities, reviewing the morning floor checklist. Her blonde hair was still smooth, her navy suit still precise, her white blouse still crisp, but something in her posture had changed. She no longer stood like a locked door. She listened before she answered. She asked before she corrected. When the facilities employee explained that the East Conference corridor needed an extra drying mat because wet shoes had made the marble slick near the elevator, Lauren did not dismiss it as a minor detail. She thanked him and wrote it down herself. Marcus saw the moment pass quietly, almost invisibly, the kind of moment no board report would ever capture and no public statement would ever praise. That was why it mattered. Lauren looked up and found Marcus watching. For a second, the old shame crossed her face, not as performance, but as memory. Then she walked toward him, stopping beside the brass sign. Good morning, Mr. Ellison, she said. Good morning, Ms. Whitaker. Her eyes moved briefly to the marble floor, to the exact place where the coffee had spread 3 months earlier. There was no stain now, only light. The first dignity review summary is ready for your meeting, she said. Human resources included the anonymous responses, not just the executive summary. Marcus studied her, and the comments that were uncomfortable. Lauren nodded, especially those. A quiet understanding passed between them. Forgiveness had not been given as a shortcut. It had been built into work, meeting by meeting, conversation by conversation, policy by policy, until apology became less important than evidence. Marcus looked through the glass wall toward the boardroom, where the directors were already seated. At the head of the table, his name card stood upright now, no longer hidden, no longer waiting for permission to be seen. Beside his chair, there would be water, reports, projections, and the future of a company still learning how to tell the truth about itself. He touched the handle of his father's briefcase, feeling the worn leather under his fingers, And for a moment he heard his mother's voice, his father's quiet laugh, the buses starting before dawn, the hospital payroll office at night, all the rooms that had tried to measure people before knowing them. Lauren stepped aside, leaving the path open, not like someone yielding to power, like someone finally understanding respect. Marcus walked forward. The automatic boardroom doors opened with a soft breath. Behind him, the lobby continued moving gently. No applause, no announcement, no dramatic turn. Emily answered a call. Caleb handed an intern a folder. Lauren bent to pick up a paper someone had dropped and placed it neatly on the reception desk without a word. Morning light spread across the marble, clean and quiet. And this time, everyone standing on that floor belonged before anyone asked who they were.